Hi guys, my name's Holly and I'm here with another recent reads video. I'm just going to go through my 5 latest books. The first book I have on this list is The King of Crows by Libby Bray, which is the 4th and final book of the Diviner series. And this is a YA series that is set in 1920s in New York City. We follow a really diverse cast of characters from multiple points of view, and it's kind of starts off as a mystery and grows over the series to become something more. It is dealing with the haunting of New York City and of America, and basically it is how America's history, its past, all the wrongs that have happened is literally haunting them. There are ghosts. The series calls into question the idea of one single historical narrative and points out that the dominant narrative, the stuff you learned in your history textbooks, is not the only story. In fact, that there are many missing voices from the history that we have in our high school textbooks. And it calls us to question what happens when we ignore it, when we try to hide it, when we don't acknowledge it and deal with it and make reparations. And it's that we are literally haunted. And even though it is set in America, I think this is applicable to every country ever. Every people ever still have the parts of their history that they try to ignore and that they try to suppress. One of the key things that I loved, the argument in this book, is that not only must history be remembered, it must be reckoned with. The finale in particular is dealing with the idea that history is a story and that stories have power, and that history is not to be told by a single voice, that it is complicated and interwoven, and that there are multiple voices that are often excluded from the dominant narrative, from the dominant story that we tell ourselves about our nation and where we come from. Now, the characters in this book, I love them so much. So much. These are some of my favorite characters, some of my favorite group dynamics, and I liked that there was such great development of the characters throughout the entire series, and how it felt like they were never stagnant. I liked that there was a theme woven through this finale of the characters having to acknowledge and confront their privileges, so whether they are able-bodied or white or straight, and how the world is experienced differently by their friends. Like, this cast of characters is very diverse, and they are seeing how their friends experience the world differently from them. The writing of the series is lyrical. There is a music to it, there's a tune, and it carries you through the book, and sometimes it takes a backseat to let a scene present itself. But then we have this sort of omniscient narrator that starts talking about the state of the country and the state of history and the state of remembering and story, and it's just so gorgeous. I love it. Every time I heard it, because I was listening to this on audiobook, I had to like take a second and just really let it sink in. The voice of the story has such conviction that as a reader, to me at least, it felt like I knew, I was assured that what I was listening to, what I was consuming with this book was monumental. And as a former history student in uni, and as someone who loved grappling with the complexity of history and the stories that we tell, and what it means that we exclude some and elevate others, and twist even others, that this book just really, really spoke to me. Above all, this series calls for us to take accountability for our history. We can't ignore it. We can't continue to rely on what our government decides that we should learn. We have to go beyond that, and we have to learn and comprehend and, as I said, reckon with our past. The next book I have is Seasons of War by Landy, which is like book 4 in the second series of the Skullduggery series, but the second series is actually split into 2 or something, or like 2 arcs, and so I think it's the first book of the second half. I'm a little confused. And the Skullduggery books are a middle grade, although I think they're more YA-ish now, just in sort of content and tone, urban fantasy series. And basically you start off with a skeleton detective and a girl that joins him as his partner, and the series takes off. We are so far into it, I am not even going to begin to attempt to explain the plot. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. There was definitely some heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, sad parts. I thoroughly enjoyed the time and devotion given to character development throughout the plot of this. We have our main character, and she has been through a lot, and she's given the space in this book to process and start to deal and heal with everything she's gone through, and I liked that that was shown on page. It wasn't like a time jump and, oh, I'm actually feeling a little better now by the next book. Like, we got to see her grapple with that, and I thought that was pretty powerful. I'm intrigued by the machinations of the plot. There's like one plot happening, but there is little pieces that we're seeing, like breadcrumbs, to a whole other plot underneath it, and that we've been getting since the beginning of the second series, and it's building off stuff from the first series, and we're just getting little snippets and a little bit of teasing about it. And I am so like curious about where this is going, because it's just enough to leave you confused and to speculate wildly. It's not enough to actually build, in my opinion, a substantial prediction. And I love it. I love that it's enough to tease you, but not enough to let you properly guess, because you know there is so much more to it that we're just not being shown yet. The next book I have is The Narnian, The Life and Imagination of C.S. Lewis, which was written by Alan Jacobs. And this is a biography of C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia Chronicles. But as well, Jacobs isn't just talking about C.S. Lewis, he's like exploring his ideology and his thought process and how he came to write Narnia. And I remember reading the Narnia Chronicles as a kid and loving them. They were just a fun fantasy book. And then coming across information later that they were actually like Christian allegory, and I didn't know that. And it sort of, for me, took away a bit of the magic of the books. But reading this biography actually convinced me that C.S. Lewis wasn't setting out to write some story to teach children how to love Jesus. He was mixing the passions and his ardent beliefs in his life with his desire to write a children's book. And it wasn't like he set out to write a book to make good Christian children. He set out to enchant kids, and Christianity just kind of was part of it because it was part of him. And it kind of made me appreciate the Narnia Chronicles a little bit more. The biggest thing about reading this book is having to find out that the man who wrote the Narnia Chronicles, the man who wrote about Lion Jesus, was a little bit kinky. And I kind of don't know what to do with that information. Not that I'm here to kink shame the creator of Lion Jesus. I just can't quite put these pieces of information together. And it's something I'm still grappling with. The fourth book I have is a middle grade anthology called Once Upon a Need, edited by S.K. Ali and Aisha Saeed, and this anthology is all about celebrating Eid, and it is such a joyous book. United by these holidays, we get an exploration of how different cultures and different families celebrate these holidays. And this collection itself is a celebration. It is so joyous. These stories take us through different cultures and different families, some of them going through some firsts, like there's a story about a refugee family. There's a story about a family celebrating Eid for the first time now that the parents have divorced or have moved somewhere new, or even a converted family celebrating for the first time. And also through the traditional, and not just grappling with when traditions have to change or when they come up against a difficulty in life, but also just the simple joy of having a traditional dish. I gave this book 4 stars. It was so happy and joyous. There are some stories that are dealing with some difficult things, but I have never read an anthology where I liked every single story. There wasn't a single story in here that I thought was weak or failing or should have been a longer piece than a short story, because I find it seems like a lot of people struggle to really capture the essence of a short story. Like, it's a difficult form of writing. But this collection, I liked every single one of the stories. Some I liked more than others, but they were all really great. The 5th and final book I'm going to talk about in this video is called Summerbird Blue by Akemi Bowman. This is a book I've seen floating around for a while, but I've never really heard much about it. It's a YA contemporary book that deals primarily with grief. It follows a girl named Rumi who, in order to deal with the grief of losing her sister, she goes and stays with an aunt in Hawaii, and we follow her dealing with and working through her grief. And while I think large sections of the book were very delicate, it also wasn't. Like, Rumi is given the space to be messy and angry and to work through her feelings. It was a poignant story that dealt with just so much, and it was so beautiful. She develops relationships with some of the neighbors and the community, and it was a really beautiful book about friendship and family and about the relationships you build with people that may not last forever. As well, she's a questioning character. She's questioning Arrow Ace, and I really enjoyed that she was given the space to question and to not have a solid answer by the end of the story. I also rather enjoyed the use of Hawaiian Pidgin English throughout the story. Like, these characters aren't forced to conform to like American Standard English. For me, it just really added some dimension to the story. Overall, I gave this book 3.5 stars. It was really good. I think it succeeded at what it set out to do. It wasn't anything above and beyond for me, but there wasn't anything wrong with it. It was enjoyable. I just don't think it's a book that's going to stick with me for years down the road. I think if you're looking for a book that has some sort of summer vibes to it, but isn't just fluff, it has some grittiness to it, then I would definitely recommend this book for that kind of feeling. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, bye.